I'd like to begin this evening with a land acknowledgement. We would like to start by acknowledging that Indigenous peoples have had and continue to have presence and deep connection with the lands on and near the Oak Ridges Moraine. These lands are the meeting place of two treaties, the lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit and those of the First Nations of the Williams Treaties. We'd like to thank them and other Indigenous peoples for sharing this land with us. We acknowledge this land and the people because the first step to reconciliation is recognizing Indigenous people and their inherent right to the land, and that they have been subjected to colonial oppression and injustice, which continues to this day. We need to continue a lifelong journey of understanding how our collective past brought us to where we are today, and how to create a better future for our relationship with Indigenous peoples and with this land. We give our gratitude to Indigenous peoples on and near the Oak Ridges Moraine, who have a deep kinship of reciprocity with the land and have since time immemorial. We recognize that working together will strengthen our responsibility to the land by including ecological traditional knowledge systems for an equitable and sustainable future. Before we start tonight, I'd just like to let everybody know that we have a few exciting webinars coming up. So next Tuesday, on the 27th, we're going to have one on native grasses, which is at lunchtime starting at noon. So it's from 12 to 12:30 p.m. And that's going to be hosted by Sammy Tangier, who did the winter plant ID webinar a few weeks ago, which some of you were there to see. And then after that, on the 5th, we're going to have at 7 o'clock in the evening, a webinar on how to use the iNaturalist app. iNaturalist is an amazing tool it's a smartphone app and a website, and it allows you with photographs to identify living things around you. So you can take a picture of a plant or an insect or a bird, and it has an algorithm that'll help you identify it. And then other people can go on and they can help you identify it as well. So it's an amazing way to learn about biodiversity in your area. And then we just announced today that on the 6th of March, on the Wednesday, we are going to have at 7 p.m. a webinar called Great Grasslands, which is all about the grassland ecosystems here in the Oak Ridges Moraine and across the province. And I'm really excited for that one because it's a really cool habitat. So I just have a few slides to share, and then we'll get into the presentation. Thank you for joining us today. So the Oak Ridges Moraine Land Trust, some of the ways that we help. So 90% of the moraine is privately owned, and we work with landowners to help protect the ecosystem here so that future generations can experience nature and enjoy it the way that we do today. We use a lot of different tools in order to protect the land, which go beyond the legislation. So the land trusts are organizations that are nonprofits, charities, and they acquire land and interests in land, particularly conservation easements for the purpose of conservation. So most of our properties are easements, which means that landowners can still live there and can still even farm parts of the property, but parts of the property are set aside as protected habitat to help protect the species that live there and to help protect the landscape. So we do things like raise money to purchase land and conservation easements, and we can receive donations of land, and we have to protect them forever in perpetuity. So we'll never sneak in an apartment building on top of your land if you donate to us. So we help connect people to nature. We support climate change resiliency. We protect green corridors between natural areas. We do a lot of public educational programming, things like these webinars. And with the support of all our viewers and all of our donors, we help protect ecologically significant lands on and near the moraine. The Ecological Gifts Program is an amazing thing offered by the Government of Canada. It gives great tax benefits to landowners if They allow their properties to become conservation easements. So you're protecting the earth and you get to save money on taxes and hang on to your land. And a lot of our properties also come through legacy giving as well. It's a very important component. Right now, we're working on a very exciting project, which this webinar is designed to be a part of. It's the Kirtland's Warbler Habitat Restoration Project. And so we have a program for people to go out and collect seeds of native plants. We're restoring a site in Northumberland County near Ganaraska to be suitable habitat for this bird called the Kirtland's Warbler. They're a really sweet songbird which breeds around the Great Lakes. Almost all of them breed in Michigan. There's a few in Wisconsin, and every once in a while they'll breed in Ontario as well. And they're extremely picky about where they breed. They like to breed in pine trees of two species, the jack pine, and we've also found out recently the red pine, between about 8 and 20 years of age. So they need to have forests which are regenerated through things like wildfires, which was suppressed by European colonizers. Traditional indigenous land management practices allowed for controlled burns, which preserve this habitat. And so there's a lot of species which live in grasslands and oak pine habitats, which are species at risk now because of the suppression of wildfires and because of changes in land management. So the restoration of this site for the Kirtland's Warbler won't just benefit this one bird, it'll benefit all sorts of other things like the hognose snake and short-eared owl and eastern meadowlark and all sorts of other wonderful species. So we're doing educational webinars on native plant ID in the hopes of getting people interested in seed collection. The program is aimed towards people age 55 plus in Northumberland County, but anyone can participate. And we will put a volunteer registration link in the chat in just a second. If anybody's interested in registering to volunteer for the program. And so, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we have some exciting things coming up. We have the Native Plant ID, the Grasses webinar with Sammy on the 27th, next Tuesday. And then we have Using iNaturalist on March 5th, the next Tuesday after that. And then the following Wednesday, March 6th, we have the Grasslands webinar. And you can learn more by visiting oakridgesmarine.org/events. So I'm really pleased to have our guest back with us today. Sean James has been gardening professionally since the age of 16. He's a graduate of the Niagara Parks School of Horticulture, and he has years of experience teaching at Mohawk College, over 30 years of experience in horticulture. And what's really interesting about his practice is that he really focuses on sustainable design that's aesthetically pleasing and supports biodiversity. I think there's sometimes this perception that if you put native plants and native wildflowers in your garden, that it won't be quite as impressive or quite as visually pleasing than if you bring in some of the ornamentals over from places like Europe. But Sean has consistently designed some incredibly beautiful gardens and gardens that use water in really interesting ways and conserve water. He does consulting, garden design, and public presentations like this one right now. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Sean.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate everything you folks are doing there. It's absolutely incredible and inspiring. I've helped with the bio blitzes a couple of times, and it was really neat and educational for me as well. It's really neat to get involved with this organization. Last time we talked about trees and shrubs, and I'm a big fan of perennials. When I was at the Niagara Park School, I was in charge of the perennial border, speaking of those European plants. I can't think that there were too many native plants in there, a couple, but really it's the perennials and the grasses that turn my crank, that get me all excited. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Last time we did sort of basic botany, shapes of leaves and so on. So we can skip that tonight. Some of the perennials that we're going to discuss: brown-eyed Susans, biennial evening primrose, wild bergamot, butterfly weed, common milkweed. There's so many cool milkweeds. Field pussy toes, fireweed, which I just used in landscape design, as a matter of fact. Hairy bird's tongue and hoary vervain. Pearly everlasting, which is one of my favorites. Poor Robin's plantain, a new favorite of mine. I didn't have a lot of favorites. Showy tick trefoil, wild strawberry, little blue stem, Pennsylvania sedge, there's so many cool plants to cover, but we only have so much time, so this is a beginning. And I think of that with all teaching, that really it's just to whet your appetite, get you started, and then you're off to the races. And things, as mentioned, like iNaturalist, phenomenal. I've learned so much myself with iNaturalist, everything from bugs on up to birds. I'm still learning birds. I'm not a very good birder. I'm enthusiastic, but I'm not very good. So bee balm is a wonderful plant, Monarda fistulosa. There's actually a couple of bee balms native to Ontario, maybe three. Punctata being a weird one, but cool. The seed heads, when you're going to be looking for the seed, so this part, everything else kind of falls up and dries off, but this part is very distinctive. Little, centimeter and a half buttons that are a nice, a soft brown, I would say. In the summertime, it stands out incredibly well. This is a great meadow plant. If it's in clay soil, it's a good garden plant. But if it's in really rich soil, it tends to do two things. It runs like mad, and it gets powdery mildew. And in fact, even in the wild on a wet year, that's sort of symptomatic, an identifier of the plant itself. But you'll always see it covered in butterflies and various pollinators, hummingbirds, because of the tubular flowers, love it. Lots of different insects come to feed on it, which is why it's also so good for biodiversity in general. And that's a common theme with the plants that we're going to see here. What folks have to remember is that plants take the energy of the sun and make it into carbohydrates, and then insects eat that. And that's really the beginning of most of the food chain. I mean, there's herbivores, of course, like herbivorous mammals and such, but it is the insects that begin the whole trough, the whole food chain, which is extremely fascinating to me. And when I design gardens, just as you might eventually, if you're not already yourselves, I think a lot about host plants. What feeds caterpillars and other larvae, and then what birds can feed on that. Years ago, Aileen sent me several cool pictures of birds that we think of as seed eaters, but they feed their young caterpillars. So that's really important to remember. Even cardinals feed their young caterpillars because they're little portable bags of protein. This is one of my favorite plants. This is actually biennial evening primrose. We have some evening primroses here that were extirpated and then reintroduced by gardeners. For once, we did something right instead of introducing invasive species. This plant can be very tall. It's very showy. Being a biennial, what that means is that it drops its seed in the late summer. Those grow into little, what we call rosettes, little sort of discs of petals of leaves, and then grows energy all season long. Next year, spring, up it goes, and basically seeds itself to death. And there's a really cool, you can see a picture there. It's fairly rare to see that. That is an evening primrose moth. The caterpillar is just a little green jobby. But the moth is quite beautiful. I've only seen a couple of them, and I've seen one caterpillar actually. The seed head is very distinctive. You'll see it on the left here. Really stands out in the landscape. Pretty decent winter interest as well. So where you see these, you'll often see lots of them. The rosette is going to tell you what to look for next year, and they're often sort of a red tinted thing in the wintertime with pointed leaves. And in retrospect, I should have got a picture of a rosette. We just had to go inside. Very easy to collect the seed, tons and tons of seed. They, as I said, they basically seed themselves to death because they put all their energy into making seed. So that's good to know. 4 petals, each of them is notched, bright yellow, really unmistakable, nothing like it in the landscape. And that's true of most of the plants that we're going to look at today. There aren't many things that you would confuse them with. The only thing that you might get this fellow muddled with is common mullein. And it's tough to get them muddled. Common mullein has super woolly leaves. It has little yellow flowers, 5 petals, and really, really woolly leaves. And it's a European, I would say, naturalized plant. It's not from here, but it grows here. very famous. Everybody knows brown-eyed Susan's pretty familiar plant. I didn't actually have a good picture of it. This is what it looks like regardless. It has furrier leaves than this, which is important to know. The winter, the seed heads are very distinctive, a little bit like bee balm, but they persist in a different way. The bee balm is more flattened, and the Rudbeckia is more structural, more built. The seeds that are in there start at the top and work their way down, whereas bee balm kind of looks like someone stepped on it a little bit. These are in the aster family. Lots of plants are in the aster family. And what that means is that you have disc and ray florets. We used to call it the compositae family because the flower is a composite of many flowers. This is not one flower. This is many, many flowers all sort of glued together. So these are sterile, and these are the bits that make the seed. So the seed is all in this little disc that's here. So it's very easy to recognize, and it's very easy to harvest. Now, Rudbeckia hirta tends to be fairly short-lived, not quite a biennial, although I've seen it behave that way. If the better the drainage is, the longer it will persist. The shorter the drainage, the less it will live. So, but it'll seed down, and you've got to watch for those seedlings as well. As I said, they're very fuzzy. Everybody loves this plant. This is sort of one of the poster boys for native plants that are good for gardens. This is a clump forming Asclepias or milkweed. So it all comes out of one place in the ground. Loves sandy soil. You will rarely see it in the wild in any place that doesn't have sandy soil. It grows pretty much anywhere as long as it has decent drainage. Being super, super drought tolerant. Most super drought tolerant things don't love wet feet. They don't love their roots sitting in poor drainage. And the flower, unmistakable. So you might be walking through a meadow and see the flowers from this, mark it where it is, certainly catalog it on a naturalist. And then you can go back when it's in seed. The seeds are pretty distinctive. I hate to say this, but they're actually closer to dog strangling vine than they are to common milkweed. Common milkweed, most of the milkweeds are much bolder than this. I mean, there's a few exceptions like world milkweed, which is like little needles. The easiest way to collect these is if you get them when these are just starting to turn brown, then you can open them up and rub the seeds off that center core of silk. The other way that I've seen it done, which was really neat, the Toronto Plant Market, we were doing a seed cleaning workshop, and they were using a shop vac, and they just suck everything up, not the pods, and the seeds would settle out, and the silk just bound around the filter. So you could take it off. People were harvesting the silk for other things, like insulating of jackets and so on. And then the seeds are all sitting in the bottom. So a really, really easy plant, shockingly easy to collect and clean the seed from. And I was really glad to find that out, because the way I was doing it before that was to put it in the sink and fluff it all up, stand back with a match and whoosh, and then extinguish it all. And it was still a pain to clean. So knowing that trick with the vacuum is really, really handy, because you can get a lot of seed from just one plant. Very distinctive, and you can see how thin these seed pods are. They're really less than a centimeter across and maybe 5 centimeters long. I'm actually pulling out a ruler. I'm of that age where about 7 centimeters long, where we were just crossing over from metric to imperial, so I have to translate the old-fashioned way. So that's the seed heads on this. You can see these are much bolder. This is common milkweed. This is actually in my own garden. And there's a monarch. And it's also got these little horns all over it. Other species of milkweed do as well. Not many. Showy milkweed does. I don't think Sullivan's is this distinctive. A bit of a woolly underside to the leaf. Very fragrant. There are other milkweeds like purpurescens that have these pink flowers. They're not, well, frankly, they're not as common. Oh, that's neat. There's a little gray hair streak in there as well. All sorts of butterflies feed on these. All sorts of pollinators. Every once in a while, like there's a whole ecosystem that lives around around these. Sorry, I'm just looking at keeping half an eye on the chat window here. There we go. I should have left that turned on. All sorts of volunteer opportunities. Cool. This is, I like this as a garden plant. It's super salt tolerant. It's super everything tolerant. A lot of people are concerned because it runs too much. If you get too much milkweed, you can actually harvest the new shoots. You got to cook them, but cook the new shoots like asparagus. Take off the leaves and boil them, and then bake them with garlic and Parmesan. And ever since I was a little kid, I've been eating the seed pods when they're about 2 inches tall. So really easy to identify. Same seed harvesting method with the shop vac to separate the silk from the seeds, or get them when you're just on the threshold here. See how this is still sort of green, and yet you've got spots of brown starting to form here. That's a great time to harvest the seed, a really easy time to harvest the seed, because then you don't have to do anything except rub the seed off the silk. You sort of hold it all together, and with your thumb, rub it off into whatever vessel you're using. I'm not going to get into how to germinate these things. There are recipes for germinating them, unless you're using winter sowing techniques. But I like this as a garden plant. I really do. This is in the lawn where I live right now, and I was so happy to find it. My neighbor's lawn is mostly this little tiny rosette of leaves. So a little circle of leaves at the bottom, and then quite a large flower stem on top. And then it's called pussy toes because they look like little fuzzy toes at the top. Really distinctive plant, really cool plant. I harvested the seed in probably mid-May. I gave it to a local native plantsman to grow. Next year I'll get some for myself to grow. Pretty easy to harvest the seed. It has little wind-borne fluffy seeds. So when we're harvesting things like asters, we don't worry so much about getting rid of all that fluff. It's okay to sow it with that on it, and that's going to be the same thing with the pussy toes. Very fuzzy leaves. There are a few different species of pussy toes in Ontario, at least 3. Perrii, something else, and this is neglecta. It seems like a real slam, doesn't it? It seems mean. But it's a great plant for very difficult areas. I've seen it growing in soil as thin as 3 centimeters, and growing way happy as a clam. And where it's really happy is where there's not much competition, where not much else will grow. So easy plant to spot, easy plant to harvest the seed from. It took a long time for the seed to ripen. I seem to remember it being about 2 weeks from when I thought it was going to be ready any day to when it was actually ready. And this is growing actually in my lawn right next to the Robin's plantain, which we will get to in a bit. They bloom at a similar time, a little bit offset from each other, but a similar time, and the seeds are ready at a similar time, about 2 weeks apart from each other. So very easy to recognize. And as I said, grows in a lawn. This is a plant that often wouldn't be a good garden candidate. I did actually just use it in a design out in the back 40. Really beautiful plant. It does spread very quickly. Epilobum has these, what we would call, no, they're not quite labiate. The 2 bottom petals are very distinctive. This is you'll remember from last week, this is a spike of flowers. So one long stem with flowers all the way up. It starts flowering at the bottom and flowers toward the top. It also has a little parasol, which allows it to be carried through the air. And for the moment, I cannot think of that name. It has a special name. So it's easy to see, it's easy to harvest. And it harvests, because it starts at the bottom and blooms toward the top, it is, if you miss the beginning, then you can still get it at the end. If you don't get it right on time, then at the beginning, then you can still go back and find seed for it later. This is a plant of disturbed areas. It is called fireweed literally because it blooms after there's been a fire. It will grow up. It doesn't like competition So if there's a lot of competition in the garden, it will slowly peter out. But if plants like a meadow setting, this will not be there for very long. It'll get outcompeted. But then when you burn it, it will come back beautifully. Uh, there are all kinds of epilobiums actually, but this is the showiest one by far. This actually is just around the corner down the street for me. This is hairy beard's tongue. I love the beard's tongues. I love them more and more every time I encounter them. Almost blue in some cases, blue to pink. The overall impression is of a bluish flower because it goes from pink to purple. It does have somewhat fuzzy leaves. It's not as tall as Penstemon digitalis, much more delicate. Again, it likes challenging conditions, which is really what you're looking at for all of the plants that we talk about for the Kirtland's warbler. This is on the side of a gravel bank along the road where they cleared it away, and where I live, I'm right between karst topography and glacial topography. So you get a lot of gravel outcroppings, and that's where this plant just thrives. Again, it is a good garden candidate, by the way, but it is going to kind of get lost if there's a lot of competition. So it grows where not a lot of things will grow. And it is beloved by some really cool bumblebees and butterflies and so on as well. If you haven't read the book, A Garden for the Rusty Patch Bumblebee, do so, because Lorraine and her co-writer, Sheila, go into all of the different host aspects. What insects are these plants good as host plants for? And it's encyclopedic. There's all kinds of information in there. I would say, and I'm free to be corrected here, midsummer is when the seed is going to be ready on this. And they do produce a fair bit of seeds. Yes, Japanese beetles do love fireweed. It's almost a trap crop for them. They would eat that instead of other plants. But as I said, I'd be very careful where I put it in a real garden. Real garden? That's not fair. This is Verbena hastata. The leaves are ever so slightly fuzzy, and lots of different butterflies. They have a little tubular flower. It doesn't look like it at the beginning from a distance, but if you look at them up close, there's a little tube behind each flower, which makes them very good for butterflies and hummingbirds, actually. This is a plant that will stand a wide variety of conditions as well. My experience is it's not a terribly long-lived perennial. It will live for a few years, but then you need to let it seed down so that you have nice fresh plants coming up. But it does seed quite prolifically. It's not quite a biennial and all the seed that comes with it, but a fair bit of seed. You can even see on these flower stems that there's a lot of seed going to be produced in there. Tiny seed as well. Almost everything we've talked about today is tiny seeds except for milkweed. And now, if you know that a plant is going to be setting seed soon, you can buy fancy little mesh bags, but you can take a paper bag and wrap it around the flower stem and elastic it together, or use something like a pipe cleaner, or even, I wouldn't use a zip tie, but something like a pipe cleaner to hold the bag tight, and then the seeds will be dropped into the bag. And that's a nice, easy way, if you're not sure when you're going to be back there next, a nice, easy way to collect the seed as well. I like this in a garden, frankly. And it seems to be self-seeding like mad into some of the things that I've grown from other things that I've grown from seed. So I'm getting lots of volunteers of this. So in Germany, it's very, very easily. This and Agastache, Funiculum, probably all Agastaches, are good candidates for seed giveaways because they produce so much seed so easily. One of my favorite butterflies is Painted Lady, an American Painted Lady, although to be honest, I'm not sure I could tell the difference between them. This is a plant that is, again, unmistakable. The leaves are variable. I've seen specimens where the leaves are fully fuzzy, and I've seen other ones where the leaves are quite green and just fuzzy on the bottom. Long, we would call these lanceolate leaves, like a lance, with a strong midrib. This center vein is very distinctive on them. It really stands out. When they're in bloom, well, even when they're not in bloom, they have this large white flower structure made up of lots of little flowers. A lot of the things we're talking about here tonight are actually in the aster family, which is interesting. And it's called pearly everlasting because when it's done blooming, it still looks like it's blooming. It looks like this for weeks and weeks and weeks. It is extraordinarily drought tolerant, which, as is often the way, tells you that it wouldn't be a good candidate for a rain garden. Anything with fuzzy leaves does not like wet feet, as I mentioned. Good in a well-drained situation. Very common to see it on roadsides. If you're going to see it in nature, roadsides are an easy place because they're often sandy. Not much else to tell you about this plant. It's about 2 feet high, but then again, that sort of thing tends to be variable. When nature grows seeds, they sort of tend to be all over the place, height-wise. People will say, oh, that doesn't get that tall. Well, it depends on where you are. Gray dogwood down in the Grimsby area is about 3 feet tall, 4 feet tall. But up in my place, which is only 40 minutes away, it gets like 7 feet tall. It gets very tall, even taller than that. This is, as I said, this is a great garden candidate. Ignore the butterfly weed, or butterfly bush. That's the painted lady. Very beautiful butterfly. And this is a combination of it in one of my own gardens. That's pearly everlasting with little blue stem. And they make a great combination together. If you want to get people liking a native plant garden, because they don't always, this is a great combination of plants that look really, really well together. The gray foliage of the pearly everlasting anaphalis looks fantastic with the schizocerium, and very good winter interest also. I love what I do. I will always be learning. I think if you're bored as a gardener, you're doing it wrong. This is a plant that has lovely little pink flowers, thread-like petals, very small, just very similar to Antenaria, to pussy toes. A little rosette of leaves at the bottom. Likes very well-drained situations where not much else will grow well. Reasonably shade tolerant too, actually. Mine is growing where it maybe gets 4 hours of sunlight a day, which is a bit surprising. It tolerates mowing. Just when you see it starting to bloom, don't mow it. This is a plant that was ready. It wasn't ready. It wasn't ready. It wasn't ready. Oh, it's done. Another good candidate for putting little bags over the flowers. You do need the little tiny mesh bags or something like that. Although maybe someone else has a better trick for it. A good plant also for naturalizing in a lawn because it competes pretty well, and then you'll have more diverse. I'm not a big fan of lawns, but this is a really lovely plant to have in your lawn. Large yellow disc floret, or florets, and then these ray florets, we call them, around it, and a nice little subtle shade of pink. Fairly early spring blooming, just like pussy toes. Showy take trefoil. The plant isn't new to me, but using in the garden is somewhat new to me. This is in the bean family, so you have this structure sort of like sweet peas. Yes, yes, that's actually probably perennial sow thistle. We have a lot of that here. We don't have much Canada thistle, thank goodness. Not from Canada. Not sure how we got tarred with that brush. Canada thistle's a horrible invasive. These little pea-shaped flowers are very distinctive, very bright color, stands out extremely well. You probably don't have to go collecting seeds. You just have to walk through somewhere where it is when the seeds are ripe, because they stick to you. Which makes me wonder if, oh, did I? Yes. There are many fleabanes, Philadelphia fleabane, all kinds of fleabanes that are pretty good for biodiversity as well. Some of them are annual, some are biennial, and the Robbins plantain is Erigeron, Pulchellus is a perennial, so kind of neat there. Reddish stems, now that may change with seed variability, so that's good to know, but it does seem to stand out extremely well. in the landscape, and just keep an eye on it for when the seeds are right. I haven't actually opened up the seeds. I have a feeling that it's a capsule because it's a fairly large capsule. It's maybe 7 millimeters long, and it's sort of disc shaped, so flat like a coin and oval, but with little hairs like Velcro that help it stick to you, for better or for worse. I like this plant. I'm not sure I would use it in a garden just because it is a hitchhiker. So now, wild strawberry Furcaria virginiana. There's also Furcaria vesca, which is more shade tolerant. I have difficulty telling the two of them apart. I'm not sure, I'm not entirely sure you would need to be able to tell them apart. They're gonna, if it grows there, it'll grow there. Very good for pollinators. The trifoliate leaves, so each leaf is made of 3 parts, and they're a little bit fuzzy, very distinctive teeth on them, quite large teeth, and they usually sit below everything else. So they're sort of lurking under the grasses, under the other plants that you'll see in a meadow. And just look to the flowers sitting much higher. When the strawberries are on them, they tend to get carried down to the ground. I'm not sure how easy they are to grow from seed, although winter seeding seems to grow almost anything. So pretty distinctive plant. 5 petals, like everything in the rose family. That tells you a lot there. Very distinctive, great large antlers. So all of these are what carry the pollen for the plant. And a little bit of trivia, strawberries are the only fruit that carry their seeds on the outside. Weird. Great plant for anywhere except shade or wet feet. It stands clay, it loves sand, it has great fall color. I don't even know what to call that fall color. It's purple orange, ploinge. It's ploinge. Very delicate seed heads, variability. Some of them flop in the winter, some of them hold themselves nice and upright. I don't fertilize my gardens. I don't fertilize anything. And as a result, plants tend to hold themselves up better in the snow in the wintertime. I grow plants very lean. The most I do is to add organic matter on top. And that way you don't get the flopping over quite so much. Very delicate seed heads. If you know miscanthus grass, invasive miscanthus grass, it's almost like a little miniature miscanthus grass floret. Variable in height. There's miscanthus grass in the background. Variable in height, but around 2 to 2.5 feet tall. So a good short grass prairie plant. This is Pennsylvania sedge. I use this a lot. I think this is a great landscape plant. I love the way it all cascades. It looks like the ocean frozen in time, or mermaid's hair. It's a beautiful plant. The flowers in the seed heads are fairly distinctive. They're blackish, and they will be upright on an angle. The leaves are extremely distinctive. I know no local sedges that grow like this. Very thin leaves, cascading. It will take some sun. You'll sometimes see it on roadsides, but it is more of a woodland plant, and it's pretty darn common. It's a little bit like ebony sedge, but ebony sedge is much, much shorter and thread-like than this. These leaves are only going to be 3 millimeters across, maybe. But this whole cascading thing sets it apart from everything. And getting it when it's in seed is a bit tricky. You mark where it is when you see it with these super distinctive leaves, and then try and get it when it's in seed. Now, if you're particularly clever, you might think about starting a seed orchard so that you can grow the seeds easily. I finally found a piece of plantain leaf sedge or seersucker sedge, which is way cooler, and put it in my garden so that I could eventually harvest seed from it, because I was never there at the right time to get the seed. Okay, probably a little bit overtime actually. Considerably overtime. I love questions. People can reach out and ask me questions anytime. I think last time I shared the PDF of this so that people could click on those links. I'm gonna stop sharing now. How did I miss 2 things in the chat window? Chat
I
window moves
see,
pretty fast around
yeah,
here.
I see one question in the chat. If anyone else has any other
Yeah,
questions, please feel free to put them in and you can get
that's a great question. I like it. Can pussy toes be used as a lawn replacement? Yeah, absolutely. Cornell just released an article this summer about a bunch of plants that are really good potential lawn replacements or lawn enhancements even. I wouldn't, so this is important. Everybody comes and asks me about what plant is best for X. No, no, no. Don't look for one plant. Look for a bunch of different plants that are going to do the job. So I design ground cover quilts. So I put a bunch of different ground covering plants together that are all going to do the job. But that by mixing it up a bit, no particular pest or insect is going to go buffet and attack and wipe the whole thing out. If you use a bunch of different plants, so if you were to use Pennsylvania sedge and pussy toes and robin's plantain, and oddly enough, blue wood aster, Symphyra trichum cortifolius can stand mowing, and you sort of stop partway through the summer, and then it will still grow up and bloom, but short. Prunella vulgaris, heal all or self heal, same thing, is another really good plant. So and violets are amazing. So seed them all into your lawn, or even better, grow them tiny and then plant them in your lawn in the fall, and that way you'll have a better chance at establishment. But yeah, don't look for one plant, although it is great, but look for a variety of plants. I'm just reading the thing. You know what's interesting is that most of the plants that we're looking at, because they stand so much drought and they stand such good drainage, there's no bad soil. You just match the plants to the soil. Because they stand those two things, they also tend to be pretty darn salt tolerant. I can't speak to, actually I can. If plants have fuzzy leaves, and many of the things that we looked at tonight have fuzzy leaves, then they tend to be more salt tolerant. Because they can catch the salt spray on their leaves and hold it until there's precipitation, and then it washes off. And many of the plants that we looked at, like butterfly milkweed and the grasses, and well, we didn't really look at asters per se, but they all have deep root systems as well. And the crown might be sort of layers and layers. So what's likely to grow is right at the top, but if that gets killed by salt, they will grow from below and be quite salt tolerant as well. Questions?
I think there's one here
Don,
from
can you?
Allison that says
yeah.
which, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, there's a question also about trying to discourage dogs from peeing on your native plants. I know you talked about salt, but the urine, I mean, whatever's tall and sticks out, every dog will pee on it. So you can almost put like I don't know how to do it nicely, but put like what's the word I'm looking for? Like a decoy pee spot. Something
That's a good idea.
in the corner that's taller than the plants that can get peed on. And dogs.
We actually had a fake fire hydrant, an antique fire hydrant that we planted in the ground, and that acted as our decoy.
That's so cute.
That's interesting. Yeah.
We have a question
I'm just
from
trying to see if
Allison
there's anything in the regular.
saying,
Okay.
what insects is Pennsylvania sedge beneficial for?
The first one that comes to mind is ringlets, common ringlets, and I think some others in that group, like pearly wood nymph, and I think maybe the sulfurs as well. Beyond that, I'd have to look it up. I'm just starting to learn some of the more complex relationships. But as I said, and I can't really run away right now and get it, I could look it up if I had Lorraine Johnson's A Garden for the Rusty Patch Bumblebee beside me, because she lists incredible varieties of larvae, well, larval relationships. She also talks about, I was quite surprised that many flowers, especially our spring ephemerals, are pollinated by specialist bees, especially the Adena, and I may be mispronouncing that. There's all kinds of Adena, a genus, Adena. And there's one for dogtooth violet, and there's one for this Cardamine concatenata, toothwort, there's one bee that pollinates that and so on. And it can only pollinate that flower. So it's a really cool book to pick up. Were there any other questions I missed?
No, I think if that's everything, we might wrap up for the evening. But thank you once again for joining us. It was a wonderful presentation. I definitely learned a lot. Yeah, I'm a huge spring ephemeral fan. So this April, when I'm out looking at the trout lilies and a hepatica and everything like that, I'll be thinking of the bees.
Love Hepatica.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much, everyone who joined us. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you at some of our upcoming webinars. And once again, thank you, Sean, for presenting.
Thank you for putting this on, and thanks everybody for asking such great questions. And anytime you have questions, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to answer questions. Oh, that's neat. Someone asked about fireweed. It's worth a try. Growing it in a bucket. Why not? That's a neat idea. A bucket with no bottom. Cool. Something to think about.
I did
Kirby,
post a picture
thanks,
of what
everybody.
happens when you walk through Showy Trick trefoil, my pants, when I got out.
Oh no, is that what that was?
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. I didn't want to click on it when I was doing my thing. Oh.
I didn't know people was worried, but yeah, I was a vector, and so I picked them off and threw out the window the whole way home, and I was expecting that drive would then be like speckled with them, but no luck.
It takes time. Years.
Yeah, it is a really hard seed. It takes a bit to break in them, and there's a teeny little seed inside. Yeah.
Oh, there's one seed inside. Thank you. I was wondering about that.
Yeah, Mary has a way of doing it. I think what she does is she chops them up. She uses a leaf blower, and sucks it in and chops it up like a mulching leaf blower, and then catches it on the outside and then shakes it off, and it breaks them. And if anyone was at the seed collecting workshop, she did some demos of it. She's got a little trick or hack for getting seed out of everything most efficiently. It's very cool. She's been doing this for
neat
40, 50, 60 years, something like that. Yeah.
Wow, cool. Perhaps I can make it to the next one of those.
Yeah. You'd love Mary. She's amazing. Yeah.
Cool.
So, all right. Well, thank you, everybody. And we'll see you at the next one.
Yeah. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Sean. Great job.
Cheers. You're welcome. Thank you. Take care. Yes, you will. Bye-bye.